Secession. You know, there is a movie out now about President Lincoln. And it's interesting or ironic that at a time that you have this movie now in the theaters, I haven't seen it, by the way, but we actually have a brand new movement in its infancy, mind you, but I believe it's going to grow over time, of people wanting to secede from the Union, much the way the southern states, the Confederacy, seceded and brought on the Civil War. Now, of course, there it was over states' rights and over what the Union was trying to force the states to do. And, of course, you know, there was a motivational factor there of slavery. But the broader issue was states' rights, and was the federal government overstepping its constitutional authority in what it was trying to do with respect to slavery. And so, you know, you had states secede from the Union. Now, today, it's similar in a sense that it's not slavery that's a key issue, but in a way, it's tax slavery, it's regulatory slavery. You've got people living in a lot of states that are under a tremendous burden. Remember, the federal government is not delivering what it was supposed to deliver based on the Constitution. It's not securing the blessings of liberty. It's taking those blessings away. It's not securing or protecting private property. It's abrogating private property. The government, the federal government, is now basically an evil force. It is a destructive force of liberty and freedom. It's tyrannical. It is much worse in every respect than were the British that we revolted against to form the country. So whatever grievances the southern states had against the North, in my opinion, they pale compared to the legitimate grievances that states should have against the government today, against Washington, D.C. in particular. So I don't think it's just the southern states that would want to secede. I think it's all the states. I mean, maybe not the blue states. There could be some states that are there. But I think if the federal government actually allowed, the problem is that the North, there was a civil war, right? Because Lincoln didn't let the states secede peacefully. He forced them to stay in the country. And so the reason that some states may not want secession is because they don't want a war. But I think if states knew that they could peacefully secede and that they weren't going to be attacked by the U.S. Army, hey, I think it's a very, very interesting proposition. The crazy thing is the media is playing up like this is crazy talk, like you would have to be an idiot to want to secede, despite the fact that all I can think of is benefits. I can't think of any negatives for a state that decides to secede from the Union. All I can think of is positives. But first, let's listen to CBS News reporting about this topic, because people are collecting petitions now all around the country and sending them to Washington for permission to leave peacefully. And people are signing it. Here, cut number 18.
Since President Obama's decisive re-election win, the White House petition website has been bombarded by a series of secession requests. Any American can sign up and create a petition, and once 25,000 signatures are collected, the White House will issue an official response. So far, there are more than 20 states, the majority of which did not vote Obama this election, requesting to withdraw and create their own governments.
Yeah, well, first of all, they don't have to create their own governments. Every state already has a government. So they wouldn't have to create one. It already exists. They would be eliminating a layer that they don't need at the federal level. Here's the continuation of this, cut number 19.
I think it's ridiculous. Honestly, I really do. I think it's really dumb.
I feel like that's a little much, a little over the top.
It's actually kind of ridiculous. It's like we're living in a Far Side or Twilight Zone. Who knows?
Texas is the first to get more than the required 25,000 signatures and should be receiving an official response soon.
Okay, so Texas is the first state that has more than 25,000 people. Now, CBS, they're laughing at Texas as if Texas would be stupid to leave the United States. Stupid? I mean, could you think of anything that where they would be hurt? I mean, if anybody could think of what would be a negative, think of one negative, because I'm going to go off and list a bunch of positives. All right, if Texas were to secede and become its own country, right, what would happen? Well, they have no state income tax right now, so they would eliminate the federal income tax. They would also eliminate all payroll taxes. They would get out from under all federal mandates and requirements, right? They wouldn't have minimum wage laws anymore. They wouldn't have all these federal crazy OSHA requirements. They would be free. They would only have their own regulations that they would have to deal with. They wouldn't have any regulations to deal with coming out of Washington. Now, what do they get? What do they get? What do the citizens of Texas get for all this money? I mean, technically, all they really get is an army. Well, they could probably, for a fraction of that cost, they could probably beef up their own militias, their state police. They might be able to hire, the U.S. government, just contract them out and just pay them a flat fee for protection. Not that they need that much. And I don't think, the U.S. government would be foolish to turn it down. I mean, after all, what they've got all this excess capacity when it comes to national defense. Might as well sell some of it off to a state like Texas. But their citizens, the citizens would be liberated. I mean, think about Texas. Texas would have a trade surplus. Look at all the resources of oil they could be exporting. It would be a vibrant economy. It would be much more vibrant if it was a separate country, as long as it didn't screw itself up and then vote in a bigger government and try to do everything in Dallas or Houston or Austin rather that they're doing now in Washington D.C. But of course they probably wouldn't. If they don't have a state income tax, why would they impose one if they became their own nation? Now, as far as people what about Social Security? Well, if you wouldn't have to pay the taxes anymore. But if you're living in Texas and you're collecting Social Security, you could still collect Social Security even if Texas secedes. After all, Social Security benefits, doesn't matter where you live, what country you live in. You can leave if you're an American citizen. In fact, you can renounce your citizenship. You don't renounce your Social Security benefits. But an American citizen can live anywhere he wants and still get his Social Security benefits. In fact, so you could live in Texas as an American citizen, even if you're not. Now, of course, you would have to renounce your citizenship, though, to get out of the federal income tax. Because if you're an American citizen, even if you go to France right now or Australia, the U.S. government still claims that they're going to tax you. So you would have to renounce your U.S. citizenship and simply be a citizen of the state of Texas. But I think that, or the nation of Texas. Now, when people say, what about money? What would they do for money? Well, technically, they don't have to do anything. They can keep using the dollar if they want to. I mean, you don't have to be a U.S. state to use the dollar. There are plenty of countries where the dollar is legal tender, where the dollar is the official medium of exchange. They're not even U.S. territories. So Texas, if it wanted to, could use the dollar, but it didn't have to. It could just allow whatever it wants to circulate as money. People can use euros. People can use Australian dollars. People can use gold and silver. They don't have to have an official money. In fact, you don't have to have a national bank to be a country. That's something that we do today. But there was a time where there were no central banks. America, you didn't have a central bank. It had one briefly, and Andy Jackson got rid of it, and we didn't have one again until 1913. But you don't need a central bank to be a country. In fact, I think a country would be better off. So there would be no requirement that Texas, as an independent country, would form its own central bank. It could just let the free market supply money. And probably it would end up being gold or silver. But if Texas, for some reason, wanted to issue paper money, hopefully it would be smart enough to want to back it by gold. And maybe it could just raise taxes a little bit. And Texas citizens would have a lot more money because they weren't paying any federal taxes. And they'd have a much more vibrant economy. They can raise a little money and they can build up a treasury of gold upon which to base a new paper currency backed by gold if they wanted to. But again, they don't even need it. I think it would be very easy transition to make. And I think that the people in Texas would love it. And in fact, people would want to immigrate to the country of Texas. I mean, you would have a net drain of Americans wanting to leave the 49 states that remained and join Texas. In fact, it would probably be so good and so beneficial that Texas would pave the way and other states would want to secede and become their own nation. It would be the exact opposite of Europe. See, Europe is coming together And, I got news for you. It's not good when you bring nations together and you create another level of government. It's not a good thing. We've been living with a federal government out of control for years, and I think if we start to fall apart, then you have a roadway, a pathway out. That's the reason that the federal government would never let a state secede, because then everybody would want out. And especially as we continue in the path that we are, where we keep jacking up the taxes on the people who are working to give money to people who aren't working, the people who are still working are going to want to get out of this situation. It's a rotten deal, right? An American passport today is more of a liability than an asset, especially if you have any ambition, if you want to succeed, if you want to work hard. This is not the country for you anymore. But the country of Texas might be a perfect place for you, because the country of Texas could have everything that used to be good about America, but none of the things that are now rotten about America. And rather than talking about how stupid it would be to secede, why don't they realize how awesome it would be? Because that's how bad it's become. The only thing that might be crazy about the talk of secession is that the federal government will never let it happen. That the federal government will not allow a state to secede, because then they're all going to want to secede, except for the few states that still want to, just live off of government money. But of course, if the states that are supplying the money start leaving, then the whole thing falls apart. So that's what they should be talking about. The fact that states want to go. The fact that it's so bad, the taxes are so high. And if people think taxes are high now, wait till they see how bad it's going to get. The desire for secession is only going to increase as Washington turns up the heat on people who are still working.